Good evening. We're going to discuss some of the more advanced features in Excel this evening. And one thing to keep in mind is you may need to adjust some of the functions that you see based on the version of Excel you have. Some of the icons may be located under different ribbon strips depending on the version of Excel you're using. In this case, I'm using Excel 2016. So there's 4 topic areas in this particular technology session. We're going to discuss the if function, which is used to conduct conditional tests on values and formulas. The goal-seek function, which is used to find an unknown value that produces a desired result. The solver function, which is used to calculate an optimum solution based on several variables and constraints. And finally, we'll finish up with the scenario manager function, which is used to create and evaluate a collection of what-if scenarios containing multiple sets of data, one set for one scenario. So the if logical function is what we'll start with, and it will return one value if a condition is true and another value if the condition is false. Use the if function when you want to compare 2 items in your workbook. The if function will look something like this. I'll bring up our worksheet. Okay, this is the list that we were using in session 3. So let's go ahead and put in an if statement. So we'll say equal sign if logical test. We'll say F2 is less than 30, then trust. Otherwise, don't trust. And we'll close. So, if we look up in the formula bar, we can see the format of the if statement. Of course, we have the function itself, the logical function if. And then in parens, the first parameter is the logical test. And the logical test is any value or expression that can be evaluated to true or false. The second parameter is the value if true, and that's the value that's returned if the logical test is true. And then finally, the last parameter is the value that is returned if the logical test is false. So we can drag this down, and we can see where we can get a trust or not trust a particular person based on this particular condition. Okay. So next we'll compare the function, we'll look at goal seek, and then also we'll look at solver. But first we'll look at goal seek. Goal seek is an analytical function which allows a value in a formula to be adjusted in order to reach a desired result or answer. The goal seek feature can eliminate a lot of unnecessary calculations and work on your part. Goal seek will repeatedly try new values in the variable cell to find a solution. And that's what you want in your result cell. So let's take a look at this. I'll close this worksheet. Don't need to save that. And bring up this one. Okay, so this is a very simple model we have sales dollars that we're given. We have a bonus percent that we're given. And then we have a calculation, the bonus amount, which is basically the bonus percent times the sales dollars. And so what we may want to do is find out how many sales dollars we would have to have in this particular model in order for our bonus amount to equal $300. So what we'll do is come up to data, and then we'll again, we've got our model set up, and we're going to use our data what if tools. Now I've condensed my spreadsheet so I can capture it in the video, so I'm going to show you where it is with this condensed. It's in the what if analysis tools. Now you'll probably actually see them on a separate tab on your ribbon because yours won't be condensed. But let's go ahead. If I click this, you can see Scenario Manager, Goal Seek, and then Data Table. So I'm going to click Goal Seek. And now I've got my cell that I'm interested in, and that is B3. So in other words, I want to specify the cell that contains the desired result in the set cell box. And I want bonus amount, or cell B3, to be equal to the value of $2,500. So I now put in $2,500, so set cell B3 to $2,500, and we have to adjust something to get that cell B3 to vary, and we're going to adjust cell B1, the amount of sales dollars that we have. And that should give us the sales dollars we need to earn a commission of $2,500. So I'll click OK, and you see that GoalSeek went through a number of values, and it finally hit upon this value, $83,333 in sales, will give me a bonus commission of $2,500. Okay, and next we'll look at Solver as something we can use. Solver is a part of a suite of functions, sometimes called what-if analysis tools. And Solver is used when forecasting a problem that contains more than one variable. A Solver uses multiple changing variables and constraints to find an optimum solution to the problem. If you've ever worked with linear programming and the simplex algorithm, Solver helps you do that type of work. So let us first look at something we want to solve, but I want to show you first how you can make sure that Solver is an add-in that is displayed for you. So go over to File, Options, then click Add-ins, and you can see that I've added the Analysis Tool Pack and the Solver add-in. Now obviously where you find your options for doing add-ins may be slightly different depending on the version of Excel you're using. So You can Google that and find exactly how to do it for your version, but it's not that difficult to find. So we set up a model in Excel for Pony Espresso. And basically we have the price of regular coffee at $1.25, the price of premium coffee at $2, and the price of a Mocha Deluxe at $2.25. Then we have the quantity sold, one. I just put one in for setting a trial balance so we make sure the model's working. And then we extend it. In other words, the subtotal for each category is going to be the price times the amount needed. So 1 times 1.25 is $1.25. Likewise down here, we get 1 times 2 or $2, and then 1 times $2.25 to get $2.25. Our total revenue is going to be the sum of the subtotals for each of the 3 types of coffee. D6 is one subtotal, D10 another, D14 the third. Here's the number of types of coffee we're selling. So regular cups is just D5. The definition in this problem is that premium cups are the premium and the Mocha Deluxe combined. So we reflect that in our model, D9 plus D13, which is the number of premium and the number of Mocha Deluxe. And then, of course, the total cups is going to be D5, D9, and D13, the amount needed for each of the 3 types of coffees respectively. Now, we do have constraints. We want to maximize our total revenue, but we have some constraints on that optimization. First off, in the time period we're looking at to maximize our revenue, we can only make 500 cups of coffee. Furthermore, we can only make a maximum of 350 premium coffees and a maximum of 125 Mocha Deluxe coffees. So, the 3 variable cells in the worksheet are D5, D9, and D13. These are the cells that will be varying with Solver in order to maximize revenue. Now we also have constraints, and that's of course in the bottom right corner of the worksheet is a list of constraints that will bound this particular forecast. So the worksheet also contains cells that are going to be containing formulas on our constraints. So as we can see, this is where we get the amount for regular coffee, the amount for the premium combined with Mocha Deluxe, and then the total cups. So the subtotals for these cells, D6, D10, and D14, need to be calculated as well as the total revenue. The value for cell G6 should equal the value that will be calculated for D5. In other words, that's the number of regular cells of coffee. The target cell is G4. That's our total revenue. This is the one that you want Solver to maximize subject to the constraints. In other words, what mix of the 3 types of coffees will maximize revenue subject to the constraints we see in our constraints list. So we'll use Solver to do that. So we go over to Data. Then in the Analysis tab, we have Solver. So we'll bring up Solver. And you'll see that a Solver has the value for a set objective equal to G4. Let's clear this. And we'll say we want to make this G4. We want to maximize the value of G4 by changing the variables D5, D9, and D13, as we discussed. That's the amount for each of the three types of coffees, regular, premium, and mocha, subject to constraints. D13, in other words, the amount sold of mocha, has to be less than G13, the maximum we can make for mocha. G7 has to be less than or equal to G12. So that means that G7, the premium cups up here, has to be less than the maximum premium cups that we can make, and then the maximum cups overall, G8, has to be less than the maximum cups in our constraints, which is G11. So we see that in our solver parameters. G4 is our objective. We set it to maximize. We have our variables that can be changed. These are the variables that solver will change. And then we have a set of constraints. And we can choose the algorithm. I'm going to stick with the simplex algorithm. And then we click Solve. And so solver tells us it has a solution for us, and we'll go ahead and keep that solution. So we can make $918 in this time period, and we have the mix of coffee being 150 regular, 225 premium, and 125 mocha deluxe. Now, we can edit a solver forecast as well. To do that, we'll come up and select solver again. And let's say that this time we want to find the mix of coffee that will let us sell $600 in sales. Well, I'll tell you what, let's make it $800 in sales. So we change that value, and then we go ahead and click the Solve button. And solver finds a solution, and we click OK, and we see that to sell $800 in revenue, one possible mix for us would be 55 cups of regular, 225 of premium, and 125 of the mocha deluxe. And so now we'll go on to our last topic, which is going to be Scenario Manager, and we'll be using that to solve problems. There's different sets of problems that you may want to look at. And with Scenario Manager, what you're able to do is a set of input values and corresponding results from calculations can be made that Excel can save and report on. A worksheet can be used to conduct a what-if analysis on a particular set of data. And you can set up to 32 different scenarios. In other words, you have 32 different sets of data that are going to change your variables in your model in your worksheet. And you see what happens to the other variables as you do that. Each group of input values or scenarios must be named and stored before it can be used. So we'll go ahead and take a look at how we do that now. So here we have a model, and it's based on the number of technicians that we have, and we're going to want to vary the number of technicians, the regular hours, and the overtime hours to look at how that scenario is going to affect our total cost. So in order to do this type of scenario analysis, we again go to our Data tab in Excel. We come over to the What If analysis, and this time, instead of Goal Seek, we select Scenario Manager. So we'll go ahead and add a couple of scenarios in that we want to look and see how is this going to affect our values. So we're going to be, the Scenario Manager will be changing the variables D9 through D11. In other words, the number of technicians, the regular hours per person, and the number of overtime hours. So we're going to add a scenario, so we'll click Add, and we'll give the scenario name one person, and we're going to be changing the cells, not D7, we're going to be changing the cells D9 through D11. And as we change those, we'll be able to see the effect, or not as we change it, as Scenario Manager changes them, we'll be able to see the effect on total cost. So we'll click OK, and now Scenario Manager is asking us to put in values. So this case is one person, and we're going to say they are working 300 hours with no overtime. So we click OK there. So we've added in one person. Let's add in a second scenario. So we'll say one person overtime. We'll keep changing the cells the same. And here we're going to keep, again, one person, 300 hours. But in this case, we're going to say they're working 50 hours of overtime. And obviously in our model, the overtime rate is going to be different than our normal rate. So that will affect our cost. So we click OK there. Now we've got a two-person with a one-person with overtime. Next, let's set up a two contractors with no overtime, so we can compare the three different sets of costs we get. So let's add in another one, and we'll say two-person without overtime. Again, we're changing, or we're not, the Scenario Manager will be changing the values D1 through D11 based on what we tell it those values should be for this scenario. So we're going to say, instead of one person in D9, we're going to have two, and each of them will be working 175 hours. In other words, last scenario, the one with overtime, we had one person working 300 with 50 hours overtime. Let's compare that with two people working regular time at $175. And no overtime in this particular case. So we'll click OK. So So now we've got our three different scenarios. We'll go ahead and click Summary, and it's going to put the results in where it tells us D7, D15, D16, D17. We say yes, that's what we want. And then we get a scenario summary. So for our first scenario, one person without overtime, we have our cost of $15,000 with no overtime, and it's just $15,000 regular time. Here, the one person with overtime, we have 350 hours being worked, and our cost with overtime is $18,750. And 15,000 of that is regular hours, and 3,750 is our overtime cost. Now, if we had two persons working 175 hours each, our total cost is less than it was with the one person working overtime. It's 17,700, and that's 17,500 regular hours, and then the charge of $200 for that extra person to be on board. But we're working 350 hours, and we're still less than we were. You can come back here and see the contractor surcharge is 200. We add another one in, and we incur that. So you can see how powerful a tool Scenario Manager is, and all the others as well. We'll close this one out. And that concludes the more advanced functions that we might be using in Excel. Thank you.